From the beautiful city of Los Angeles, California, we bring you the Gimme 3 podcast. Hello and welcome, cinephiles, cinema lovers, movie appreciators, to the Gimme 3 podcast, the show where we pick 3 films connected by one theme. I'm Nicholas Ybarra. I'm joined as always by my outstanding co-host, Bella Efstratis. Bella, what's good in the hood today?
You know, nothing new. We got some rain here in LA. Thank God. It's been amazing. I love the rainy weather. I don't know about you guys, but
Well, I definitely like the rain when we're in a drought and the entire city's on fires.
pretty good news. Pretty good
rain
news.
is a welcome companion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love the rain because of the things it does. I'm not a big fan of getting wet, and I'm not a huge fan of the fact that our street like floods the second it starts raining. But I'm a fan of skiing and plants, and not a fan of droughts or fire. So
it all works out.
It rained.
Well, as I'm sure you guys could hear, we are once again joined by a very special guest today. You may recognize her from such segments as Sonja's Movie Minute. She's a producer on this podcast, a producer of many award-winning films, and the Los Angeles Film Festival director. Sonja Mereu, thank you again for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be back.
Today we are continuing our series of favorite films from the year that was 2024. 2 weeks ago, each one of us picked one of our favorite films from 2024. And if you haven't listened to that episode, you don't want to miss it. So go back and check that out. Last week, we took a very necessary and mind-bending detour into the work of David Lynch. Rest in peace. Definitely check that one out as well. But this week, we're coming back with 3 more favorite films from 2024. And a lot has happened in the last 2 weeks, including the Oscar nominations have been released. And 2 of the films that we are discussing today are Oscar nominees. But we are a year-round podcast here at the Gimme 3 podcast. So throughout the year, we have discussed even more of these Oscar nominees. We talked about, of course, The Substance in episode 43, horror films directed by women. Go back and check that out. Sonja talked about A Real Pain in episode 52, Fall Finds. You can go back and check that out. And of course, not but 2 weeks ago, in the first part of this series, we discussed Oscar-nominated A Different Man. So if you're not getting your Academy Award nomination fill from this episode, there's more stuff for you guys to check out. But before we get into today's films, since I know, you guys are into the Oscars, both of you, any thoughts on the Oscar nominations?
Oh, I like to call myself a recovering Oscar-holic. I really drank the Kool-Aid and was truly obsessed with the Oscars. And then I met this wonderful man named Nick Ybarra who loathes the Oscars. And
I wouldn't say loathed. I would just say that it is completely arbitrary. And I'll just stop right there.
I like to say loathe because it sounds better. But yeah, I think you pointed out so many things that I had intrinsically understood and felt about the Oscars, but I was just I just had to watch it. It was I was like an addict. So it's kind of liberating to not care so much about the Oscars anymore. But I will say that I really hope The Substance cleans up, and I know it probably won't. But looking at the list, even though there's other films that I think are really impressive and certainly deserving of awards, like The Brutalist or A Real Pain, so many movies, The Substance is the one that carries the most weight and joy for me.
Yeah. I totally agree with you on honestly everything. I grew up watching the Oscars every year. I was obsessed with it and definitely had those blinders on of like, like I just love watching it. And then you're so right of like it's so nice to not totally care who wins and who doesn't. But I will say I'm pretty sad to see no Nosferatu in Best Picture. I was really surprised by that one. So other than that though, yeah, The Substance was just amazing. Like so amazing. Definitely would have picked it if we hadn't already talked about it.
Yeah, I think we all would have picked The Substance. I mean, and it would be so much fun to talk about it, even to talk about it again.
I know.
So much more to say.
Totally.
All right. Well, there's no reason to waste any more time. I see no point because these movies are too damn good. So let's get right into it. Bella is going to start us off with our first film of the day.
Yep. So everyone here knows that I love animation. I don't care if it's for kids or for adults, I'll watch it. And last year we got some pretty amazing animated movies, many that I actually still need to see, like Flow and Memoir of a Snail, which are some Oscar nominees, speaking of Oscar buzz. But out of the few that I did catch, I just fell wholeheartedly in love with DreamWorks' newest film, The Wild Robot. So, for those who don't know anything about it, Lupita Nyong'o voices this so-called wild robot named Roz, and Roz was designed to assist humans with any task in the world, basically. But she finds herself in uncharted territory when she wakes up shipwrecked and alone on a remote, uninhabited island. And determined to fulfill her purpose, she sets out to find anyone in need of assistance. But instead, she runs into a variety of wild animals who really don't take kindly to her intrusion. After narrowly escaping a bear attack, Roz accidentally destroys a bird's nest, leaving behind a single surviving egg. As the egg hatches in her hands, Roz is faced with an unexpected and daunting new task: motherhood. With the help of a sly fox named Fink, voiced by Pedro Pascal, Roz learns how to care for the little gosling runt that she names Bright Bill, with the hopes that he can fly with his own kind by migration season. So to give you guys some background on the film, Disney and DreamWorks icon Chris Sanders, who gave us movies like Lilo and Stitch, The Croods, How to Train Your Dragon, he directed this beautiful film based on Peter Brown's 2016 book of the same title. And he'd heard about it through his daughter, who read the book many, many years earlier. But when DreamWorks approached him to write and direct this adaptation, he finally sat down, read the book, completely fell in love with it, and jumped at the opportunity. So he put together a fantastic team with DreamWorks producers Jeff Herman, Dean Dubois, who we worked on with How to Train Your Dragon, as well as editor Mary Blee. He also brought in the incredible production designer Raymond Zibak, who is best known for his beautiful background art in the Kung Fu Panda franchise. And he also got Heidi Jo Gilbert from Puss in Boots: The Last Wish as head of story on the film. So we've got this incredibly talented team, and they have created what I think is easily DreamWorks' best work since How to Train Your Dragon all the way back in 2010, which is a pretty bold statement, I know. And, it took 15 years, but I think it was worth the wait because I feel like the studio really used all that time to experiment with different animation styles and storytelling, and it pays off in a really big way in The Wild Robot. I mean, the animation style in this film is breathtaking. There's still the basic foundation, CGI foundation for each character, but then they've added this gorgeous layer of paint and individual brush strokes over every character and background. It's like a watercolor impressionist painting in motion, and it's such a beautiful blend of different techniques that just feels really fresh and even groundbreaking, not just for DreamWorks, but for every other animation studio like it. I think it's proof that these studios can go beyond the standard photorealistic CGI that we see all the time, by embracing texture, color, and blending and layering all of these crazy, bold artistic choices, and it proves that audiences will love them for it. So before I get even more carried away, Sonja and Nick, tell me, did the wild robot sweep you off your feet, or was that just me?
No, I loved it. I thought it was gorgeous and so sweet. You know, there's a scene or a sequence where all the animals on the island have to live together in Roz's, like, I don't know what you would call it, home, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
Cave type thing.
Nest almost.
Nest.
Cave
Yeah.
nest.
Cave nest. And that is literally my dream. Like, that is my idea of a perfect life, is to be with every animal, but have them all be nice and cuddly.
I know, it's so cute.
It was incredibly sweet, and you know, it had a great message about you know, finding yourself, which is in so many animated films and so many kids movies. But I think that this one, I think that the fact that it was about a robot who has to find themselves made it actually kind of more profound than some other movies.
It's funny how, you know, like sometimes in order to make a movie about what it is like to be human, it's the best way to do that is to make non-human characters, because this movie is really about the human condition, you know.
Yeah.
So much of it's about, you know, they say things like, oh, you know, a name can't be a number, even though, you know, the powers that be are always trying to make us numbers. Even ourselves, we're trying to like make us numbers. How many likes do we get? How many views do we get? It's like, we're on numbers. And it's like, no, we're not numbers. We're people. But there's one line that Fink says that really, I think, is kind of a great theme for this movie, which is Fink, who is played by Pedro Pascal, plays this fox who kind of tags along for all the adventures that Roz finds herself in, and her adopted son, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
He says, "We're all trying to survive, and kindness is not a survival skill." And you know, I mean, that's obviously saying a lot about the tension that seems to be percolating throughout not only the country but the world. But
yeah,
they pay that off so beautifully in the movie. And so yeah, the themes are just terrific. I agree with you. I think the animation style is really, really lovely. I love seeing just the blend of 2D and 3D animation. Yeah, I agree. Like, I especially liked when they would just do a wide shot and there'd just be, the camera wasn't moving or doing all this crazy sweeping stuff. It would just like sit there and it looked like a painting. And yeah, like you said, you could see the brush strokes. It was really lovely to see, especially for an American animated film, because few American animated films kind of like do the 2D thing anymore.
Right.
It's
well, and
so
like
true.
the layering of the like high tech CG created animation with the like more analog paint look over it. It's like kind of represents Roz, right? She's like this super high tech robot, and then she's wild.
She's an artist. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so beautiful. Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. I think this movie really stood out to me because animation wise, because I love like the older Disney animated styles that are kind of like watercolor and that sort of thing. And I did read that Bambi was like a huge influence for like the forest in this film. And all the like painted backdrops, because that's just like some top tier artistry there, as well as obviously Miyazaki with like My Neighbor Totoro, which I can totally see as well. For me, when I watched it, I immediately thought of Pocahontas, because there's a lot of scenes, kind of what you were talking about, Nick, where it's just like a wide shot and the camera's not moving, but there's like a kaleidoscope of colors, and it just reminded me of something straight out of like Colors of the Wind. But then it's got this kind of modern twist on it. I loved how it kind of switched around throughout the film as well. Like there were times where I felt like the animation almost looked like a storybook illustration,
Right.
which I think is maybe a fun nod to Peter Brown's book, just acknowledging that this is an adaptation visually. So I thought that was really cool too. And to add to that, I read that the director loved the concept art for this film so much that he wanted the finished film to still kind of look like those concept paintings all the artists worked on. And I loved reading that because I've always been obsessed with concept art, specifically Disney's, to be honest. Sorry, DreamWorks. But sometimes I think the concept art is like almost more beautiful in its simplified form than the final product. And so I love that that the director kind of felt that too and was like wanting to make sure that the beautiful artwork they created wasn't forgotten or like wasn't lacking in the film itself. Because I totally felt that watching this film is like there's almost an unfinished vibe to it in ways that feels intentional and works and is beautiful.
Yeah, for sure. It it really does feel, for lack of a better word, wild. Like they really have a naturalistic feel, which, like you said it earlier, like so many of the really gorgeous animated films that we see nowadays just don't have that, like they're hyper polished, like Inside Out 2, which I also just watched. And maybe that makes sense because it takes place inside a teenager's brain,
True.
Different setting, different style.
Didn't think about it like that, but that's actually a really good point.
But did you guys see Flow, the animated film that's from Latvia that's nominated for 2 Oscars?
I really, really want to watch it.
No, I haven't seen it.
It's really good. I highly recommend it. I wouldn't say that the animation is like the same style, but it's living in the same world as Wild Robot, I think. They're very like complementary films.
Oh, love that.
This movie also, I mean, you talked about the art being kind of like inspired by or akin to storybook animation, but there's also some moments that feel very storybook, and I guess it's because it's also based off of one, but like specifically there's one moment where they introduce the possum character who's played by Catherine O'Hara, and she's got like all these babies and kids hanging off of her body as she's like strolling around. It just felt like an introduction to a character that you might see in, a 1940s Disney movie or something. It just felt so classic.
Mm-hmm.
I totally agree with that.
But then
she was like
modern
my favorite
humor.
character. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I agree. She's my favorite character too. I said with some modern dark humor.
Yeah.
You're lucky you just have one. As a mother of 7. 6 babies. It's a full-time thing. But it's not all bad. Just mostly bad.
It's okay, Mom. I'm alive.
Oh, yay. Well, good luck.
Goodbye. We like your new baby. Hope it doesn't die.
So good. Yeah, I was really surprised with like the dark humor in this, but like I think for the story they're telling, kindness can be a survival skill. And life is hard. Like it's kind of the perfect setting for it in like a natural setting and the food chain and the animal world. I think it was just such a perfect place for them to explore.
Well, they
these life lessons
deliberately use the word hate in the movie. Like they are talking about hate, which they should, because there's plenty of it in this world. So why not dive into it? These kids, need to learn not only what hate is, but that it sucks.
Yeah, totally. And see like what it does to you and to others. And you see that so clearly in this film.
See, this is why I don't have kids, because we watched this movie about kind of parenting, and I'd be like, oh, you think that's a good movie about parenting? Check out this fucking movie called Eraserhead, kid. Check this shit out.
Yeah, you do a double feature in the same day.
Well, also, unlike a lot of Disney movies that focus on like the child, this focuses on the parent as the main character. You know, like the child being in this film is Bright Bill, the adopted Gosling, right? Like his storyline is important, and he's obviously a character that has an arc and goes through changes, but it's really like the mother's story.
Right.
And off the top of my head, I can't really think of any Disney movies that are like that, you know?
That's true.
No, most of the moms are dead in Disney movies.
So this one had to get a
evil.
trick. Yeah, this one was like, they killed off the real mom, but the stepmom isn't evil. She's very nice.
She's very nice. And she makes mistakes, but she's learning and growing too. It's really cute. I want to give props to Lupita's voice performance as well, to be honest, because one thing I noticed is like the robot, the director talked about this in an interview I read as well, is like they didn't want the robot to have any facial articulation, kind of like the Iron Giant or like Wall-E. Their faces move in ways where they don't even have to speak, and you can kind of like see what they're feeling. But this one, they wanted to rely on her voice to be like the source of emotion. And that seems really hard to do from her standpoint. And, you know, she's working with a robot who's also going through an extremely complicated change and like experience. Like she's a robot who's also kind of a mother. And so she literally and is also learning about herself and this world around her. She like starts with one voice and ends with another, but it's amazing because the change is so smooth that like you don't even notice it until you do, and you're like, oh my god, she's grown so much. Like she's a different person, robot. I don't know what word to use, but you know what I mean. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, she was perfect, like the perfect casting for this. Yeah, I loved her performance. Although Nick and I were talking earlier that we both thought it was interesting that they had Pedro Pascal not have his like kind of signature accent.
Yeah, I didn't even know that was him until the credits rolled. Like when I first watched it, I didn't even recognize his voice, which is kind of crazy because I feel like he does have such a recognizable voice.
It felt like a missed opportunity because he's got an amazing voice that is so charismatic and sexy, but not in like a overbearing way, you know?
Yeah. It's like charming.
And they kind of eliminated the charm from his voice. That was a bummer. That was a little bit of a bummer for me. But
I wonder if he sounded too much like Puss in Boots when he was speaking with his real accent.
Perhaps.
But it's like you just assume that when you hire an actor to do voice work that it's to sound like themselves on some level.
Yeah.
You know, they're acting, but like the actual like quality of their voice, the way that they speak, their accent, whatever, is what you're hiring them for. So yeah, it was kind of strange choice. But I mean, he did a good job. I didn't think he was bad. But
he was really funny.
Yeah, certainly.
Oh, thanks for talking so much. Now I know who to eat first.
But I will say, just going back, the scene where Roz has to gather every single animal into her home, like sort of like it's like Noah's Ark, right? Except it's like because of a snowstorm, not a flood. But it was like my favorite thing. I was just like, if I didn't love this movie before, I love it now. And she's like wearing the raccoon on her head because she's carrying all the other ones in her arm. And, you know, it looks like the Davy Crockett hat or whatever. And I was just like, brilliant. That is amazing. Yeah, it makes you wish you had a robot to just save
I know.
you.
I need a Roz.
Yeah, I got to work on some marketing for this movie, actually.
Oh, amazing.
And on one of them, they brought in like an actual Roz robot for the shoot.
Whoa,
No
cool.
way.
It was Roz and Tiki Barber. And yeah, she was as big as he is. So it's a pretty
Damn.
big
Oh
robot.
my God, that is crazy. I would love to see that.
Yeah, I'm sure they like had fun using that for using her for various events or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's always fun when you get to work on marketing for a movie that's good and successful. It's feels very validating.
That I would imagine.
It's not always the case.
Did you guys shed any tears watching this movie? Or it was just me?
I don't think I did, but I definitely felt. I was feeling it. I was feeling things, but I don't think I shed. I didn't think I got to the shedding tears point. Maybe the eyes were moist. Let's say.
Yeah,
I know some.
That's enough.
I know some people have something against the word moist, but I like it. And my eyes were moist.
Yeah, I was going to say I was definitely moved, but I will say that the ending gets a little bit action movie-esque, and it might have taken me emotionally out of the story a little bit. Like I think I was, which I mean, it was like I guess it was necessary to like wrap up the film and to tell a full story, but the stuff earlier in the film, like when she was teaching Bright Bill to fly and he was gonna leave for his migration, and she didn't know if she'd ever see him again and how he was gonna do. Like, I think that was the emotional point for me, but I don't know if I actually like cried. But I think that was like the most moving part. By the end of the movie, which is when I usually cry at movies, it had been kind of like a wild action ride for the last 20 minutes. So I think I was like really feeling a little different. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so fair. I actually had a similar experience, except for this movie, it was such an embarrassing theater experience because I went by myself and I was like the only adult in the theater. And I was like, I had the whole action scene. I was feeling good. I was like, oh, this is so great. I really enjoyed this. And then the last like 3 minutes just made me cry. And I think a huge part of it is the music. I love the score in this, and it just makes me feel so many things. And so then I'm like sobbing in the theater, and I had to like wait for everyone to leave because I was just too mortified to get up and leave like that with all these kids.
You want a bunch of kids making fun of you?
Yeah, I couldn't handle it. It wasn't worth the risk. Pathetic.
I don't know. There's nothing more enjoyable than crying when you go to a movie by yourself.
Oh, yeah. It felt so good.
Nice.
All right. Yeah. You guys can check it out on Peacock and on demand, wherever you rent your movies.
All right. And I do have to make one correction, though, actually, in the previous episode where we were talking about our favorites of 2024 2 weeks ago. I said that all the films that we were discussing would be American films, but that's actually not true because our next feature is from Ireland, eh? Or did I do Australian accent right there?
I don't think it was either one.
All right, well, it's from Ireland. Anyways, Sonja's going to take it away here.
This next film is from Ireland, from the north of Ireland, to be precise. And or I should say, it's not even actually all in English, even though we think of the Irish as speaking English. But a good amount of this film is actually in the Irish language. So very much not American.
Mm-hmm.
And what film am I talking about? I am talking about the amazing, the crazy, the drug-fueled Kneecap. So for those of you who haven't seen Kneecap, Kneecap is a stylized and mythic telling of the formation of the band Kneecap. Kneecap is a current Irish rap group based out of Belfast. And the story goes in the film that fate brings JJ, a music and language teacher in Belfast, into the lives of party animal best friends Nisha and Liam Og, when Liam is arrested and requests an Irish language interpreter. They quickly formed the band Kneecap based on their shared resistance against the oppressive English government through speaking and rapping in Irish. They also love to do drugs, so that helps too. The band quickly finds a following among young people in Belfast, and they become unlikely figureheads of a civil rights movement. In the film, there are also several other plot lines that kind of all congeal into the amazing and wild climax of the film, such as Nisha's father is in hiding because he was a member of the IRA and people are after him. So he's in his life and has some impact on the film. And Liam meets a Protestant girl and they fall in love despite their differing backgrounds and the fact that the culture would try to keep them apart.
Mm-hmm.
The film is directed by Rich Pepiat, who I believe is from England. And then the film stars the three members of the actual group, Kneecap. Liam, who in the band goes by Mohara, which means my friend in Irish. Nisha, who goes by Moglai Bop. And JJ, who goes by DJ Provi. And Provi is slang for someone in the IRA. And it also stars Michael Fassbender as Nisha's father, Arlo. So I picked this movie because I love it. I wasn't familiar with the band Kneecap, but my best friend Sasha is a huge fan of theirs. So when this movie was coming out, it was on her radar since like before it even premiered at Sundance. She was like, this movie's going to come out and it's going to be the best movie of 2024 and you have to see it. So
That's so cool.
So I felt really like in the know. Kneecap's actually playing at Coachella this year. So they're definitely on the rise.
No way.
So I got to see it at a screening when it came out, I guess, over the summer. And two of the members of the band, DJ Provi and Nisha, were actually at the screening, as was the director. I think Liam, they said he had COVID and wasn't able to travel. So it was awesome. It was like a really lively screening. You could tell that everybody in the theater was just all in on the film. And then when they came in to do the Q&A, it turned out that the two band members had just done Cypress Hill's podcast right before. So they were like so stoned that they couldn't even talk. Like legit, like the director was like, so I'm just going to tell you guys now, I'm going to do most of the talking because these guys are extremely baked. And they were just kind of like, yeah.
So they're practicing what they preach. They're not posers. They are legit drug fiends.
Yes, they are legit drug fiends. And I guess you can look or listen to Cypress Hill's podcast with them, and apparently they are just, I don't even know what the word would be. I think we used to say booted in my day when you were just like so high that you couldn't talk.
Mm-hmm.
Blunted, my day they'd say blasted.
Zooted.
My day they would say stuck.
Yeah.
Ooh,
He's
okay.
stuck.
Yeah. That's probably an apt description. So yeah, I could go on. I have, I went to Ireland 2 years ago and actually went to Belfast. So I felt like I felt a little bit more informed than I expected to about the Irish history and stuff watching this film. But what did you two think about it?
Yeah, this movie's amazing. It packed a serious punch even just watching it in my living room. I wish I had the opportunity to see it in theaters. The second, if there ever is another screening of it here in LA, I'm there. I'm seated 100% because this was just so much fun. This is like my kind of shit. Yeah, I loved it. I'm so glad you picked this, Sonja.
Oh, good. I love to hear that.
Yeah, there's a lot of energy, not just from the content, you know, the subject matter, the characters. The characters bring a lot of energy, but there's a lot of energy in the direction as well. You know, there is a lot of extreme camera angles. There is a very like creative use of coverage. There's a scene I really love where Michael Fassbender's talking to his son, and they're like both sitting in a car. You know, one's in the driver's seat, one's in the passenger seat, and they use the rear view mirror reflections as like part of the coverage, which I really liked, just because, you know, I've seen other movies do it before, but there's something about the where they placed the camera and when they chose to cut to it that just felt fresh, and it also worked emotionally really well for the scene. I thought, and then they have like these little kisses of animation, you know, over certain scenes. Like scenes aren't fully animated, but you know, if a car will like come to a stop, they'll animate some dust particles coming off of the wheels, or just little kisses of animation that make it all feel very alive and buoyant. So it's constantly moving and constantly makes you feel like you have partaken in some amphetamines yourself. Or maybe it was because I was on amphetamines when we watched this. I have no idea. Who's to say?
Who's to say?
They also like do animation of some of the song lyrics,
right?
Yes.
Which I like. Yeah,
I loved that. Yeah, it kind of it almost had like a mixed media vibe to it. I'm such a sucker for that kind of thing. I mean, I love animation. We talked about it earlier, but I really liked the animated elements of this movie for sure. And I think it worked so well because you know, the whole film is about creative expression, rebellion, liberation, drugs, sex, music, like all of that. So I feel like the animation just takes those like experimental and psychedelic elements to the next level.
yeah, absolutely. They do a good job of representing the characters' perspectives when they're high.
Yeah.
There's a really funny scene at the beginning of the film when Nisha is like basically like a rave gets busted up, and he's like running away, and he like jumps on a bus, and he gets on the bus, and like everybody just looks really like weird the way that you like would only look under really horrible fluorescent lighting. You know, like where your skin's like greenish and like just every pore is visible. And then everybody's wearing like the same outfit. And then you realize that the outfit is actually the fabric of the bus seats.
Yes, I loved that.
You're just like, oh yeah, that's like totally how it is.
Yeah. It's so good. I also loved the claymation scene where they're also tripping sack off ketamine or something backstage, and someone like comes to talk to them about being on the radio, and they're made of clay. They're like melting into the couch. She's made of clay with like a radio head, because that was probably the only word they heard. And it's just like, it's so creative and just so much fun. You can really feel like the passion behind this film with all of those little elements.
Yes. Actually, I think maybe it's a different performance scene where they accidentally take ketamine. I think it's their first performance.
Yeah.
They like accidentally take ketamine, but they think they're taking coke.
Is dit een kokerweertje, hè? Die kent niet. Kathleen, zijn fucking kid. Los, zeg het. Dat was een pokken met hart. Fucking drug dealer in Sky, fuck!
Very much fucking sweet. It's not like we never had a line of cat before, is it? It'll be 20 minutes before it kicks in properly.
By then we'd be halfway done. No need to panic. What are you flipping staring at? No need to panic. No need to panic.
I mean, that scene had to have taken inspiration from Wolf of Wall Street, from like the Quaalude scene where Leo's trying to drive the car.
Oh yeah.
It like totally reminded me of that.
That is
well, I have to say,
true.
we're talking about, like, for those who have not seen the film, it is not just like a glorified drug movie. There is a lot of depth to it. It's just the drugs. Clearly, they enjoy doing drugs, and they do a great job of representing that, like the feeling of being high.
Yeah, but like you said, I think perhaps even the more impressive part of this story and this film is that they do a wonderful job in a very short runtime, very briskly. They tell the history of Belfast and its people, you know, their struggle for independence and identity, and they do it all in a very fun way. I mean, like you said, this film's a riot. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, but there is a very good amount of history in this piece as well. If it didn't guarantee that you would lose your job, I would recommend that teachers show it to their students, you know, if they're like giving European history lessons, but you know,
just show like the redacted version with no drugs.
Yeah. It'll be like 15 minutes
long. It'll make no sense. Yeah, I was actually, so when I went to Ireland, it was the spring of 2023. So it was like about 2 years ago, and I didn't know a ton. And I have no idea what trip I would have planned if I was planning it myself, but I went with Sasha, who had been kind of self-assigned studying Irish history, specifically around rebellion and independence and that kind of stuff for like at least a year before we went. So it was really amazing because I definitely got a perspective on the history that I would not have gotten otherwise, or at least not just on my own. You know, I would have been like, oh, there's a castle.
Yeah.
Right.
You know? What about potatoes? You know, which, by the way, there's like a lot of really amazing food in Ireland that is very much not potatoes.
They're not called potatoes over there, Sonia. You know what they're called?
Potatoes.
Potatoes. Potatoes.
That's just a brand of crisps. But anyway, so we did a road trip and we went to the north of Ireland, to Derry and to Belfast. And when we were in Belfast, we actually did a black cab tour. And that's like, you get one of those like classic black cabs that you see in like films that take place in London or whatever. And they took us around the town and basically told us like the history of the Troubles and the relationship between the Catholics and the Protestants, or like, you know, the IRA and then whatever the Protestants are called. And there was a huge wall, which you see in the film, that runs through Belfast to this day and gets locked at night. And people there really identify with Palestinians because they kind of feel that it's I mean, not to say like it's a comparable thing. I don't know. I want to put words in their mouth, but yeah, that, you know, having your city divided based on, you know, this like political kind of bullshit.
Yeah.
And, you know, the power group versus the disempowered group.
Right.
So, yeah. So it was really cool. So when I was watching this film, I kind of was bringing all of that knowledge with me. But I was curious if you guys, how much you knew about it, and if you didn't know too much, how much you felt like the film, you know, informed you about the history and about the current politics of the day, I guess, as well.
Yeah, I didn't really know. I didn't know anything about like the current politics. I'd watched Kenneth Branagh's Belfast a few years ago, which was set I think more in like the 50s and that sort of era. So I got kind of that history of it. I love that movie. Um, but I didn't know, it was really interesting to see like the lasting effects of all of that all the way up until like just a few years ago, basically. So yeah, this was like a really powerful uh like history lesson and like just learning experience of like what's going on right now.
I mean, in the 90s, and I don't remember this really either because I was too young, but, you know, Bill Clinton was part of the time where they signed like the peace accord that kind of ended the Troubles. He was part of brokering that deal. And I don't think that Ireland has been like a hot topic politically outside of, you know, Ireland or outside of the UK since then, because it is a relatively small place. And there hasn't been, you know, I don't think violent uprisings since then. But yeah, I did think that the movie did a great job of acknowledging that the Troubles were so important and had such a big impact. But I also think like right at the beginning, they're like, they show all the footage of cars blowing up and things like that. And they're like, but that's not what this movie is about. So they're also kind of like, but we have moved on a certain level. Like that's not what we're about these days. You know, we're not about the division between the Catholics and the Protestants or the Irish and the, you know, the British or whatever. I mean, I'm sure they still want independence. Obviously they do, because the film is largely about fighting for the right to speak their own language. But yeah, I think that it makes a good point of how the younger generation has kind of moved on from those kind of like dichotomous beliefs and would rather just have like equality and empowerment for all.
Right.
And I think like the girlfriend and Liam are a good example of that, right? Because she's Protestant. He's, I guess, Catholic or, you know, not Protestant. And they still fall in love, but they have like this ongoing kind of thing, like where he's like saying the north of Ireland and she's saying Northern Ireland. And they're, you know, just kind of like showing like we still come from these upbringings, you know, her mom or her aunt is like the evil cop that's trying to arrest him the whole movie.
That was crazy.
But that the younger generation is able to move beyond that and just wants, yeah, everyone to have their rights.
Yeah.
A lot of depth hidden behind all that ketamine.
Definitely. Yeah.
All right. I do have 3, count them, 3 pieces of trivia here for Kneecap.
Okay.
Let's go.
Piece of trivia number 1. Sonja, you mentioned that these people relate to or empathize with the Palestinian liberation. Well, the band refused to have the rights to their films sold in Israel because they are such vocal supporters of the Palestinian liberation. So, my Israeli friends, you cannot watch it over there, my friends.
They just have to go to Palestine to watch it?
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah.
The piece of trivia number 2. Bella, you talked about that claymation scene. Well, they really wanted to, when they had the idea for doing that claymation scene, they wanted to homage this animator, Stephen McCollum, who made this cult series, Pulling the Devil by the Tail, which you can find on YouTube, by the way, if anybody's interested. They were big fans of that series. Well, just turned out they reached out to him and he decided, hey, I'll just fucking do it. So
No way.
There you have it. Stephen McCollum did the animation, that claymation scene for this picture.
Cool. I love that.
And then finally, piece of trivia number 3. There's throughout the film, there's all these, you see all these memorials for Bobby Sands. You know, he's one of the would you say, the most famous activist, Sonja, for the North of Ireland? One of the most famous activists?
Yeah, I mean, you see murals of him everywhere. I mean, you literally see like soccer scarves with his picture on it. And Sasha's listening, so I'm sorry if I get this wrong, Sasha. I think he was the first person to die in this hunger strike.
I see.
In the late 70s, and there's a film about it.
Well, that was my piece of trivia, was that they made a film about him. It's called Hunger. And who played Bobby Sands in Hunger?
Oh, wow.
Michael Fassbender.
I was so shocked to see him in this. I had no idea he was in it. And those baby blues, man. Get me every time.
Looks like shit in this movie.
Oh. There's actually a really funny...
By design, I mean, I think he's supposed to look like shit.
Well, he's on the run. But there's a really funny, line actually about Bobby Sands it's the second scene that you see Michael Fassbender in. So you see him at the beginning when the boys from Kneecap are kids, and he's speaking to them in Irish and teaching them, his principles. And then you see him the second time is in present day, and he's in hiding, and he's doing yoga on the beach.
Oh, yeah.
And they're like, what do you call an IRA member who now teaches yoga on the beach? Bobby Sandals. And that's how I knew everyone at the screening I went to was informed, because everybody laughed. And I was like, that's kind of a deep cut. I mean, it's not, it is and it isn't,
It's a deep cut for Americans, and also a very cheesy dad joke for the Irish, I'm sure.
It was such a dad joke. And then remember in in a later scene when his dad comes out of hiding and saves him from being attacked by the Radical Republicans Against Drugs group. They the first thing he sees is his feet, because Nisha's on the ground and he's wearing the sandals with socks.
Socks and sandals. I loved that. He's like, duh? So good.
All right. Well, any final thoughts on Kneecap before we move on?
No, I hope everyone sees it.
Yeah. I wrote down 3 Letterboxd reviews that I really liked.
All right. Let's go.
Okay. First one by Sophia Mangun. Apologies if I mispronounced that. They said, imagine my shock when the person who I had to tell to stop vaping at the premiere came up on the screen. That was great. That sounds like a true story. Number 2 by Fulmore. We've got, sorry babe, the Irish balaclava stays on during sex. Which will only make sense if you've seen this film, of course. And finally...
and that's what the DJ wears every time they perform.
And that's yes, it's so good. Yeah. Oh, so iconic. And lastly, we have one by Bobby Finger saying, language is freedom. Ketamine isn't cocaine. Just wonderful. And I really liked that one.
Boom. Kneecap, everybody. Check it out. It is available to stream currently on Netflix.
And they're going to be at Coachella for anybody who's partaking in the festival. And they have a North American tour in October, I believe.
Way.
They are not coming to LA, however, because I am told that is the only show on their last tour they didn't sell out.
Oh, damn.
So too bad Bruce Springsteen was in town the same night. Otherwise, we would have 100% been there.
Yeah, we did see Bruce. And I don't regret
Bruce
it.
won.
And you know what? While we were on that subject, this is a detour beyond, probably one of the biggest detours we've ever taken on this podcast. I love my city. I love the city of Los Angeles. We've been talking about how much I love this city for the last few weeks, especially. But the city of Los Angeles, listen to me when I say, you guys are the worst concert motherfucking goers of any city that I have been to. It's very offensive to artists. You're always on your phones. You're always talking. You know, you have no respect. You've got no manners. Get your shit together and be good concert goers, or stay the fuck home.
Let them hear it.
Hey, I'm with you on that one, Nick. I mean, I think it depends. I have been to some magical shows. I actually thought the LCD sound system crowd was quite good when we went.
Yeah, everybody was over 40.
Maybe that helps. But yes, I mean, as you know, I travel out of state or at least out of city to go to shows that I really like, even if they're also happening in LA, because I just assume that they will be better elsewhere. And that's kind of sad.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is be better. Be better. We're proving that we can be better as a city. Let's just keep it going. Let's just not, let's extend it. Extend it to the concert going. All right. On that note, something way more serious. We are going to bring it on home with an incredible piece of work here, Sing Sing, starring Colman Domingo, Clarence Macklin, and Paul Raci. Much like the title suggests, the film takes place at the Sing Sing Correctional Facility. We follow a character named John Whitfield, but everybody calls him Divine G, and that is Colman Domingo. This man is in prison for a crime he did not commit. But Divine G, he's able to find some peace. He's able to find some purpose and positive outlet through a theater group that is run and operated by Sing Sing inmates. And it's called RTA, Rehabilitation Through the Arts. It's essentially a theater group. And Divine G is somewhat of a father figure to this group. He's a grounding force. He brings written work to the table. He encourages the men. He recruits. And he's a pretty damn good actor in his own right as well. But when a new spot in RTA opens up, the group welcomes Clarence Macklin. Everybody calls him Divine I. And he is played by Clarence Macklin, the real Clarence Macklin himself. And Clarence he's not of this theater world, you know. He's testy, he's angry, he's still hustling, you know. He's not opened up. And putting a gangsta in a room full of theater folk, if you've ever been in a room full of theater folk, you can imagine how it's going to go. At first, at least. But over time, you know, Divine I, he starts to find his way. He allows himself to be more vulnerable. He opens up a little bit. And Divine I finds himself. As he's finding himself, though, Divine G starts to lose himself. A series of tragedies compounded with years of time for a crime he didn't commit, they start taking its toll on Divine G. Can he make it through? Can the program make it through? Sing Sing is the name of the film. But before we dive into the, you know, kind of what we thought, there's a few production things that I want to touch on that I think are really important. Outside of Clarence Macklin, we had a lot of the supporting cast were played by men who actually went through the RTA program. So there's like an innate authenticity and realism to this film that makes it feel like sometimes you're watching a documentary. And that's because most of the men that are in this film lived this life. So that's really amazing. And the other thing I want to point out, and I think this is so wonderful and impressive, and when we talk about changing the game, you know, in a very real and meaningful way, this is a way to change the game. Everybody on this film, cast and crew, agreed to be paid the same daily salary. And in exchange, members of the cast and crew took like a percentage of equity, basically like profit points. The points would vary based off of like how involved somebody was in the production. You know, if they did a bunch of work and prep for the film, obviously they're going to get a little bit more points. But this approach not only allowed them to get the film financed very quickly because it lowered the overall cost of the production, but it also gave agency to everybody working on the film, from the cinematographer to the actors to the production assistants. So we listened to a great interview with Colman Domingo on The Treatment with Elvis Mitchell, the best film podcast in the world. And he just talked about how this being a potential gateway for independent cinema and perhaps beyond, you know? Like, I know we just spent 2 years going through strikes that maybe were productive, maybe they weren't. Just need to start thinking outside of the box with some of this stuff as studios try to continue to find new ways to fuck up this industry. There are ways to do it that, you know, can change the game. Anyways, I thought those things were worth mentioning, but the film itself, the art itself, we'll talk about that. Bella, what were your thoughts on Sing Sing?
Oh, God, this movie hit me like a ton of bricks, but it also lifted my spirits at the same time. I'm so glad you picked this film. I think it's definitely one of the most important films from last year. And it's so amazing to hear that behind the scenes info as well. Like, it just makes me love it even more. You know, it touches on an issue that we don't talk about enough in general, and one that I think we definitely don't see portrayed in film, like especially not in this way. I was so shocked to get such a joyous story set in prison. Like, obviously the film is still honest and brutal. It doesn't sugarcoat the realities of prison, but that's not like the focus of this film. There's still so much joy and light, literally. I love the way this film is shot, the warm lighting, the colors, the beautiful film grain. Like, oh, it's just gorgeous. And not only does it have such a powerful message, but it's just brilliantly executed and filmed with truly extraordinary performances. Like, this was an easy 5 out of 5 star review from me. Easy peasy.
Yeah, on the podcast that Nick just referenced on The Treatment, Colman Domingo talked about how there's like no violence in the film, and how it might be the first movie that's ever taken place in a prison that didn't have like even a punch thrown.
Yeah.
And like there's several times in the film where there's like tension, you know, like the first scene where we meet Clarence Macklin. You know, you don't know if he's a dangerous guy, you know, you don't know anything about him. He's definitely defensive. And there's definitely a part where you're like, oh yeah, I think he's going to hit someone or someone's going to get hit.
Yeah.
Or like a scene later when you're talking about being with the theater folk and they're very touchy feely, and like someone like walks behind him or like touches him like on the shoulder, and he like postures like he's going to hit them, you know, just because that's how he's been conditioned. But no violence, just all, you know, working things out through talking and or, you know, acting exercises when necessary.
Yeah. I also noticed like a no label kind of dialogue. Like, I feel like we don't learn why everyone in the group is in prison, which is something I feel like we see a lot in other like movies or TV shows about prison. It's like, oh, this guy is this and this guy is this. But in this, it's like, it's not about that. It's about like who they are in this current moment, and who they want to be. And I really, really loved that aspect as well.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen those movies, you know. We've seen those prison movies a bunch of times. And this program, and what prison is supposed to be, is rehabilitation. That's what it's supposed to be, you know, rehabilitation center. So what we are getting are these men rehabilitating. So it's that process. It's seeing that version of prison, which is sad to say, fresh.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
It's been a program that was established to help the population with management skills, and it's turned into something a bit more, wonderful, because it helps people get more in touch with their feelings and able to process and actually move through and truly get some rehabilitation.
It was so amazing how at the end of the film, we get to see the productions that they were putting on. Because they don't really tell you at the beginning that this is a real thing, you know? Like, you're kind of just thrown into the world and you follow the story. And then at the end, they kind of reveal, like, through the credits, that all, you know, how many of the guys were actual inmates. Previously, I think they're all out now. And then you get to see, like, the footage of the actual production that they're showing them, like, create during the course of the film.
Right.
And I mean, it's incredible that this exists. I mean, Sing Sing is a notorious prison, not to say that it's better or worse or anything than a different prison or another prison, because I don't know, but Sing Sing is a notorious prison, so I assume it's considered one of the worst.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
And fun fact, my second favorite podcast besides Gimme 3 is WTF with Mark Maron. And his producer, Brendan's wife, Dawn, is actually one of the, like, main people in the RTA organization. So she has for years, I think she's actually in some of the footage at the end of the film. But yeah, she has for years been going in to Sing Sing and doing these plays with the inmates.
Oh, amazing.
So she knew, like, Clarence Macklin and a bunch of the other guys.
Wow. That's amazing.
So, yeah, I was excited they interviewed her briefly on the podcast to ask about her experience with it.
Nice.
It was very cool.
That's so cool.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about the cinematography. Bella, you touched on it, but it really is gorgeous. It's shot on 16 millimeter. They use a lot of natural light, a lot of light just coming through the windows, which Pat Scola, the director of photography, talked about when they were scouting locations and scouting certain prisons. He thought it was very jarring and both beautiful and kind of sad that so many prisons there's windows all over the place. So it's like, it's nice because you have all of this warm light pouring in, which is great because it's healthy.
Right.
But it's also kind of tragic because throughout so many of the prisons, you can see trees outside and you can see off in the distance, you could see the world out there. And it's like there right in front of you, but you can't get there. So they use that in a lot of the shots I notice where, you know, Divine G's kind of like favorite hiding space, his corner. They use a lot of like frame within a frame where they have that prison window and all the bars across it. But, you know, there's those trees out there that he just likes. And there's even a shot where he's just like sticking his hand out the window, just like feeling the air. So anyways, really strong cinematography, but not in a way that is showy or, you know, in your face. Like, they let the actors do what they need to do, and the camera hangs back when it needs to hang back, and it moves in when it needs to move in. It's very subtle but beautiful.
Totally agree. It almost has like an avant-garde aesthetic to it in that way of like just exactly what you said. Now that you say it, I'm like just thinking about it, where there are very for lack of better words, like cinematic shots, but then like you said, it kind of goes back to the documentary handheld camera movement in like rehearsals and their meetings. And it's like, it's such a beautiful balance though, because in those kind of more cinematic moments, you're like it's almost like meditative, like it's like a moment to breathe, and then you're like back in the action and the excitement or the the tragedy and all of it, and it's just it's so beautiful.
Yeah, it does have like a documentary feel. I mean, you really, if Colman Domingo wasn't in it, it would be like so easy to almost believe that it was just a documentary.
Yeah.
Because it feels so natural. He also talked about how he wanted to make sure he had like a couple of his like good theater buddies in the film. So, as you said, Paul Racy, who plays kind of like the director of the theater group, not an inmate, a civilian. I don't know what they call him. But yeah, he's like a big time theater guy from New York. And so is the actor who plays Mike, who's Divine G's best friend in the film. But I swear, I think everyone else are actual former inmates.
Yeah. Yeah, which is amazing. Yeah, Sean San Jose is the name of the actor who plays Mike, and he's theater actor from New York.
Yeah, so good.
So good.
So the film has been out of the theaters for a little while, but it's back in theaters now because of, the Oscars or getting Oscar nominations. And I think they're currently also releasing it in like 1,100 prisons across the United States.
Oh, how cool is that?
Yeah.
And I think that's the first time that this has ever been done.
Right.
At least maybe with like a new, a first run movie that it's like playing currently at the same time that it's in the theaters.
Right.
So, yeah. So
it's so awesome.
That is hopefully really empowering to people and maybe helps get this this kind of organization or this kind of program in more places.
Yeah.
Hopefully, yeah. It really shows the power that art holds, you know, and how it can be liberating and therapeutic.
I feel like we also have to talk about Colman Domingo's performance. I mean, he's up for Best Actor. I did have there's kind of like a switch halfway through this movie in tone and Divine G himself. And I kind of had a moment of like the way, Nick, you were talking about Kristen Stewart's performance in Love Lies Bleeding a couple episodes ago, where like at first you were kind of like, okay, interesting. And then the second time you were like, oh my God, there's so much there beneath the surface.
Right.
That like same effect happened to me with Colman Domingo within the first, like while I was watching it. But just in that like first half of the film, I was like, oh yeah, like he's amazing, but like I'm mesmerized, but I'm not like blown out of the water. And then when that switch happened, everything that he did before that just made even more sense and like made his performance even more impactful. And I feel like there's just so much behind his eyes in this performance from beginning to end. Like, there's like who he is inside and then how he kind of presents himself to the group. Like at a certain point, you start to wonder if like, ooh, is this bordering toxic positivity? Because he's so afraid of losing this program that's like given him life and love and art and connection, that he's just like constantly putting on this happy face and demeanor, or like taking on the peacemaker role in the group. And yeah, just like that threat that all of this could be taken away at any point is so daunting and would be so world shattering for him that it's like he's almost walking on eggshells a little bit. And just all you can see and feel all of that in his performance. And I was really impressed with it. What did you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how I did not know who Colman Domingo was until about a year and a half ago. But he has become one of my all-time favorite actors, not just current favorite actors. Like he gives every performance I've seen him in feels so lived in, and like that you completely believe him.
Yeah.
So, that's, like one of the signs of a great actor, I think, especially when you're so handsome and like recognizable to like still be able to slip into a role. But I think also his involvement just as like a producer and as like the a creative force behind the film and behind it, getting it made and getting it out there and getting it seen as much as it has, like he just inspires me so much. I think he's one of the greatest people working today, probably.
Mm-hmm.
And so funny. I mean, he doesn't get too many chances to be funny in this, but he knows he throws it in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, the parts of his performance that are most impressive to me, and it's all impressive, but the parts that are most impressive to me are when he's not speaking. Because you can see so much of what you're talking about, Bella. You can see him trying to put on the happy face, in the first half, pushing through when, maybe he's struggling, but he's got to be the strong man. And then when he loses the ability to do that and you start to see him crack a little bit, or when he finds out that Divine Eye is going to get out and he's not going to get out, there's a moment before he says anything where you just see all of it go on his face. Like you see like, why him? Why not me? But also like, I'm happy for him. Like, you see him go through the 7 stages of grief almost in like a 5-second span. And it's really crazy. So yeah, I mean, he knocks this movie out of the park. He does a lot to connect it all, because it's like you said, we say it feels like a documentary. That's a credit to the director and everybody involved. But it's not a documentary. And in order to get the emotional weight of this thing over the edge and bring everybody to tears like it does, you need a heartbeat, and that heartbeat is his performance.
Totally.
I think it's also worth noting that the whole film was shot in like 19 days.
18 days, yeah.
Wow.
But Colman Domingo had even less time. I think he did all of his scenes in 13 days.
Sheesh.
Because he was in between shooting like pickups for Rustin and shooting The Color Purple, I think.
Wow.
So yeah, and I think he said he didn't even, like, there was no time for rehearsal or anything. It was kind of like,
oh my God.
Oh, we got them, like everything was coming together, and it was like, well, now or never. So yeah,
that's amazing.
Kind of amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, considering how much of the movie he's in, like there's not that many scenes where he's not in it. So it's like they had to do a lot of the movie in 13 days, seemingly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Well, that's where that natural light comes in.
Well, and maybe with the like less experienced actors, maybe just going for it and not doing a bunch of takes and stuff, or doing long takes, was the way to go.
Yeah,
that would make sense, honestly.
Yeah, and you don't got to deal with, egos and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, They might have egos too, you know.
That's true.
Different kind.
Different kind of egos. When you're in prison and you get out, I don't think you're going to be. There's a different mindset, I think. Cool. Any final thoughts on Sing Sing before we wrap it up here?
No, other than I had a thought that it could easily be adapted for Broadway.
Yeah, I think it'd make a good play.
Yes. And Colman Domingo can act in it too.
Right. But, and or people who've come out of the program.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. Yes, obviously. That would be amazing.
They're presumably all from New York.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Not necessarily the city. But yeah, I think that this is something that I hope has like the impact that they want it to have, as far as like not just getting awards or getting accolades for Colman Domingo or even Clarence Macklin.
Right.
That, it has like tangible effects in, programs for incarcerated people and program and things for them to do when they get out too,
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, 100%. If you live in Los Angeles, maybe you're able to watch this right now. It is the week that we are recording this. It is still playing at the Lemley NoHo 7 and at the Burbank Town Center 6. I don't know if that will be the case next week when this episode gets released, but check your newspapers, which I'm sure all of you get, or check the Fandango app, whichever is more readily available, and see if it's playing in a theater near you. If not, it is available on demand, I believe. Or on Apple TV?
Yeah, it looks like it's on Apple TV.
Apple TV. It is on
Plus,
Apple
or
TV. Whatever that streaming platform is. But if you can't see it in the theater, check it out in the theater. It's excellent work.
All right. That's a wrap on part 2 of our favorites of 2024. We had The Wild Robot, Kneecap, Sing Sing. Each one is completely different from the next, but all 3 are really, truly amazing works of art, pushing the boundaries of filmmaking and cinema itself. You really can't go wrong with any of them, so you might as well add them all to your watch list. Or if you've already seen them, please let us know what you guys think. We're seriously dying to hear your thoughts. We'd also love to hear your 3 favorite films from 2024. If you have any others outside of the ones we've been talking about, let us know. If you scroll down to the episode description and click the send us a text link, you can send us what you think of these movies, what you think of this episode, this series, your 2024 favorites, other movie recommendations, really anything you want. We love to hear from you guys, and we always appreciate the feedback. You can also follow us on Instagram at Gimme3Podcast. That's GIMME, spell out 3 podcast, Gimme3 Podcast. And each week we post a fun edit of all the films featured in our episodes and on set or behind the scenes photos, movie lists, and we'll even have some polls on our story here and there where y'all can vote on the next films that we talk about here on the podcast. And if you love the show and you want even more content, you can subscribe to our Patreon at the link in our episode description for just $5 a month. Each month we post a spoiler-free episode featuring 6 movie recommendations based on our watch lists from the previous month. They're so much fun, you guys won't want to miss out on all of our recommendations and reviews. Also, if you set our episodes to automatically download on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen, that is a huge way to support our show. It helps us reach even more cinephiles like yourselves. Nick, do you want to tell our lovely listeners where they can find you on the socials?
You can find me on Letterboxd, on Instagram, and on Blue Sky, all at Nicholas Ybarra. Ybarra is spelled with a Y. I may be leaving Twitter, also known as X, so I'm going to end it there.
Alrighty, and Sonja?
I am on Letterboxd at Sonja M, and Sonja is spelled with a J, Sonjam.
Awesome. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in to the Gimme 3 podcast, and we'll see you at the movies.